In July 2015, a quiet neighborhood in Deerfield Drive became the scene of a shocking triple homicide. Inside one seemingly normal home, a mother and her 2 adult sons were found brutally murdered. How did investigators piece together the evidence, uncover a chilling timeline, and ultimately bring the killer to justice? Today, we're diving deep into the twisted story of the Smith family murders. Pensacola, Florida. A city where the Gulf breeze rolls in, heavy with salt, and the sound of gulls mixes with the hum of everyday life. It's a place known for sugar-white beaches, Navy pilots cutting across the sky, and neighborhoods where folks wave from their porches. On the surface, it feels calm, almost timeless. A southern coastal town with deep military roots and a proud history that stretches back centuries. On July 31, 2015, the sheriff's office was called out for what seemed like a simple welfare check. Richard Smith was a respected man who worked at the Pensacola Naval Air Station for the Department of Homeland Security, who hadn't shown up to work in 2 days. Now, missing a day wasn't unheard of, but missing 2 days without warning and not answering his phone was completely out of character. Richard was always available, 24/7. His boss grew so concerned, he went to Richard's house himself. When he couldn't get an answer, he called the authorities. Richard wasn't just any ordinary man. He was accomplished, well-off, and lived what seemed to be a stable life with his family. When deputies arrived at the residence, nothing seemed immediately alarming. The home looked untouched from the outside. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. But there were packages stacked at the front door, mail overflowing in the box, newspapers piling up. Clearly, no one had been tending to the home for days. The deputies made the call to enter, and the second they stepped inside, they knew something wasn't right. A strong, disturbing odor filled the air. The interior was cluttered, almost like a hoarder's house, piles of belongings and scattered items everywhere. Then, in the den, they saw it. A massive pile of clothes and blankets was heaped in front of the television. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than clutter. But peeking out from underneath that pile was the unmistakable sight of a shoe, a foot. And it didn't stop there. On the couch, buried beneath another mound of blankets and clothing, deputies found another body. 2 men, both in their 40s, were dead inside that room. After finding the first 2 bodies in the den, deputies carefully backed out of the room and pressed deeper into the house. When they entered the living room, the scene turned even darker. Bloodstains marked the floor, faint but undeniable. And laid across the path from the living room to the back bedrooms were a series of rugs, like someone had tried to cover up or contain what had happened. Following that trail, investigators reached one of the back bedrooms, and there, under yet another massive mound of clothes, they uncovered a 3rd body. This time, it was a woman, elderly. The sheriff's office quickly worked to piece together who the victims were and why they had been targeted. With help from Richard Smith's employer, investigators reached out to a half-brother who lived nearby. He arrived at the house and confirmed what authorities had already begun to fear. The victims were 49-year-old Richard Smith, his 47-year-old brother John, and their mother, 77-year-old Vonsel, who was a widow. Her husband had passed just a few years earlier, but not before leaving behind a small fortune. Richard and John still lived at home with her, quietly managing their lives in the same house where they had grown up. And while the Smith family didn't live lavishly, investigators quickly discovered something that would change the stakes of the case entirely. When they pulled the family's financials, the numbers told a different story. Between investments, bank accounts, and certificates of deposit, the Smiths were sitting on just under $1 million. That didn't even count the house itself or whatever life insurance policies they might have had. On the surface, they looked like a modest family, but behind closed doors, they were wealthy. And to investigators, wealth often means motive. Over the years, Vonsel Smith had grown frail and disabled. She rarely left the house, spending her days in front of the TV, ordering trinkets and small comforts from QVC and the Home Shopping Network. Her son John was also disabled. Despite his challenges, he held a steady job at Walmart, where co-workers remembered him as quiet, hardworking, and universally loved. Then there was Richard, or RT, the glue of the family. When their father passed away, Richard stepped in. He took care of his mother, drove his brother to work, and managed the home. He was devoted, but reclusive. This was a family that lived quietly, tucked away from the outside world. And yet, someone had brought unimaginable violence into their home. Crime scene techs began their work, slowly peeling away the mounds of clothing that concealed the victims. Every layer removed revealed not only more evidence, but also more horror. Each of the three Smiths had been killed in a brutal, up-close manner. John was found on the sofa where he died. The blood spatter behind him told investigators he never stood a chance. There was evidence of blunt force trauma. His skull cracked open by a blow so violent it left matter on the boxes that were stacked behind him, and across his neck a savage laceration. Richard's body lay on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. He'd been shot once, the bullet ripping through his ear, but it wasn't fatal. The medical examiner concluded it likely stunned or incapacitated him. The real kill came moments later, when his throat was slashed so deeply it severed an artery. He bled out where he fell. And then, Vancel. Her favorite chair was soaked in blood, but her body wasn't there. Drag marks along the floor led them down the hallway into the back bedroom, where her remains had been stuffed beneath piles of clothes. She, too, had been beaten in the head, and like her sons, she'd been cut across the neck. When investigators examined Vancel more closely, they noticed one of her fingers. Her pinky had been half severed. Was it a defensive wound? Or something far more sinister? At that point, no one knew for sure. This wasn't just murder. This was rage, intimate, unrelenting rage. As investigators expanded through the house, more pieces of the puzzle surfaced. The kitchen, in particular, revealed disturbing clues. A hammer, cleaned but not clean enough, was discovered, along with the sink it had been washed in. Both were tested for DNA. Nearby, in a laundry room close to the back door, a trash can told its own story. Inside was evidence that someone had tried to cover their tracks. Items belonging to the victims, cleaning materials, cigarette butts, even Vancel's purse. And tucked away in the kitchen, investigators found Richard's checkbook and the binder he always carried with him, a detail that would later prove critical in uncovering the killer's true motive. Despite the carnage inside, the house itself told a different story. Yes, it was cluttered, but it wasn't ransacked. No drawers pulled out, no valuables stripped away. Expensive items were scattered throughout the home, still sitting right where they'd always been. If this had been a robbery, the killer had done a terrible job. The only thing missing was Richard's wallet, everything else untouched. Investigators turned their focus outward, hoping that friends or co-workers might point them toward a hidden grudge or a festering conflict. But what they found was the opposite. No one, not a single person, could recall a bad word about them. This wasn't the kind of family that attracted hatred. Detectives widened the net, canvassing the neighborhood, knocking on doors, looking for the slightest crack in the quiet suburban veneer, but the neighbors offered little. Most barely knew the Smith family at all. To them, the family kept to themselves, polite but private. A few noticed that Richard's car hadn't moved, that he hadn't been to work, but beyond that, nothing seemed unusual. With so few leads, investigators turned their focus closer to home. That's when the name Donald Hartung surfaced. Richard and John's half-brother. He lived 3 miles away, and as far as detectives knew, he was the only immediate family member still in the area. Detectives brought him in, not as a suspect, at least not yet. But sometimes, in cases like these, the people closest to the victims hold the darkest secrets.
I was very close to my mother. My father left me when I was a baby. She raised me. And I was very, very close to my mother.
All right.
And I can't imagine not being able to see her.
When detectives sat down with Donald, he didn't hold back. He seemed more than willing to talk about his family, especially his mother. He painted a picture of the woman who raised him and shared pieces of his childhood in Bruton, Alabama. He was quick to point out that Richard and John were only his half-brothers. They had a different father than he did.
What's your relationship with John and Richard? Do you have good relationships with them, or?
Yeah, we have great relationships.
I mean, do y'all do stuff together? Y'all get along?
Well, we don't really do a whole lot together. We all work all the time.
When was the last time you saw your family?
Tuesday, I went over. I always go over on Tuesdays. I got there probably about 1 or 1:30. I stay pretty much out in the yard playing with the dogs, go in, talk to Mama, watch television together. She loves QVC. She watches it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And she puts it on the news, and I fix dinner for them every Tuesday. So we had fried chicken, green beans, corn, and biscuits, and French fries.
Okay. Is there any leftovers or anything?
Well, yeah, I always put RT's in the stove. I always put his in the stove. His is always in the stove when he gets home from work, because sometimes he don't get in until 8, 9 o'clock.
Now, was he there when you were there Tuesday?
No, I never saw RT. Most of the time I leave before he gets home.
Okay.
Normally we watch the national news.
At 5:30?
At 5:30, and then I leave right after that. And that's about what time I left, was I'd say between 5:30 and 6, right in there.
Okay.
According to Donald, his family was last seen by him on the 28th of July, on a Tuesday, which was 3 days before the bodies were discovered.
How does it make you feel to hear that your family was killed?
Makes me feel pretty bad.
I mean, you don't seem
Well,
that upset.
I've got to control myself here. So I've got to take care of this.
Let's go over your timeline one more time, okay? When I have it all straight.
I got there about 1. When I finish cooking and I get it all ready, I give Mama hers. John comes and he gets his. I go outside, I smoke a cigarette. Then I come back in and I've already got my plate ready. I sit down and eat. That's what I do every single week. Okay?
What time you think it was when you left?
6 o'clock at latest, maybe 5:30.
During his first interview, Donald told investigators that he left the house before Richard returned from work. But detectives already had a clear timeline, thanks to a video of Richard leaving his job and the short drive home. That story quickly unraveled when a neighbor came forward. They recalled seeing Richard at the house while Donald was still there, and even noted that Donald didn't leave until after Richard had arrived home. That single detail blew a hole in Donald's account, and as investigators pieced together the evidence, everything pointed to one chilling conclusion. The murders happened on Tuesday, July 28th, after Richard got home from work, which meant one thing: Donald wasn't just a family member stopping by. He was the last known person to see them alive. As the timeline grew clearer, so did the suspicion. Dinner had been cooked, eaten, but never fully digested. And with each revelation, Donald began to look less like a grieving brother and more like their prime suspect. Detectives brought Donald back to the sheriff's office for a second round of questioning. This time, they weren't interested in small talk. They wanted to lock him into his story to see if it would hold under pressure.
I can tell you, if my whole family was murdered, I would be showing a little bit more emotion than you do.
In time. I'll be showing plenty of emotion. Believe me, I've already showed some emotion.
To
Well, not to many people, but I've got my way of handling things.
how do you handle things?
I'll hold it inside.
Were there things going on in your family and you've held it in for so long that finally you had enough
There was
and got
nothing
angry
going on in my family. Nothing at all.
and killed your mom
I did not kill my mother.
and then killed your brother?
I would never kill my mom or my brother. Either one of my brothers. I mean, do I look like some kind of a blooming maniac to you people?
No tears, no anger. Donald just sat there, showing absolutely no emotion. It was unnerving, almost as if the gravity of 3 brutal murders meant nothing to him. And once investigators tore holes in Donald's timeline, that's when detectives secured a search warrant for Donald's house. Inside, they found something strange. One room stood out immediately. Shelves held books on Wicca, witchcraft, and the occult. A Ouija board sat in plain sight. It wasn't just a bedroom. It looked like a shrine. To investigators, it was more than unusual. It was chilling.
So don't you think it's pretty much a coincidence that you're a Wiccan and your family's killed like a Wiccan sacrifice?
I don't know anything about Wiccan sacrifices. I don't know a thing about anything like that.
If you know about the blue moon and all that kind of stuff, you do.
Well, I know about the blue moon. I know it's 2 full moons, but I mean, it's been all over the radio. Yeah, I do have a Ouija board. I have a prayer room.
Are you Wiccan or?
Yeah, I'm a Wiccan.
You are?
I've been a Wiccan for about 3 years.
Have you?
Yeah.
What is that?
It's a pagan religion.
Does it have to do with like moon phases and stuff like that?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Has a lot to do with moon phases. No, there's no sacrifices in Wicca.
Really?
No.
And some of these Wiccan things in July and August, when there's 2 full moons, sometimes they'll offer a sacrifice.
Yeah. Well, I don't offer sacrifices ever.
They drain the blood out of their sacrifice and hit them in the head.
I don't know
And then
anything
they
about
cover
that.
them. Then they cover them to keep them warm.
I don't know anything about that. I mean, I've never sacrificed.
read
I
it
wouldn't
tonight.
hurt a chicken.
That's the same way your family was killed.
That's the same way my family was killed.
Mm-hmm. You went over there and you killed your mother, then you killed your brother, and then you waited, and RT got home and you killed him. Okay?
No, sir.
And you killed them all the same way. Stabbing them.
Stabbing them? They were stabbed?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. I thought you said they were shot in the head.
I did tell you that last time.
I don't do animal sacrifices, and I sure did sacrifice my family. If you think Wicca's got something to do with this, you're way out there. I would never hurt anything.
When the media got wind of it, the story exploded. Headlines suggested a possible ritualistic killing, a blue moon homicide, linking the crime to witchcraft or Wicca, stirring both curiosity and outrage, especially from members of the Wiccan community, who were quick to clarify that their religion had nothing to do with the murders. For investigators and prosecutors, though, the Wiccan angle was ultimately a distraction. The facts of the case, the motive, the timeline, and the brutal nature of the killings were what mattered. You know, one of the things that really jumped out to investigators was just how off Donald's story was. Little inconsistencies kept popping up. He wasn't exactly truthful about when he left the house, and the details about his relationship with his brothers didn't quite add up either. Richard and John were from Vonsel's second marriage, Donald from the first, and from the get-go, there was definitely tension, especially between Donald and Richard. Richard's co-workers mentioned he didn't really like spending time with Donald. In fact, on Tuesday nights, he'd purposely work late just to avoid going home, because he knew Donald would be there, cooking for the family. Little things like that, they might seem small, but to investigators, they were pieces of a puzzle, showing just how strained and complicated this family relationship really was.
As far as I'm concerned, me and my mama and my brothers, we were close.
Does it seem like Mom loved your half-brothers more than she loved you?
No, never. It never seemed
I
like
mean,
my
it's
mom
odd
loved my brothers more
to
than
me
she loved me.
because
She
all
loved
of
all of us.
With no confession, no physical evidence, and not a single camera catching him in the act, Donald walked out of the sheriff's office a free man. He was allowed to go home, and through it all, Donald never shed a tear. Not at the funeral, not at the graveside, nothing. One relative later recalled a terrifying moment. They were at Donald's house, sitting at his kitchen table, when he suddenly reached up on top of his refrigerator. He looked at them, then sneered, "Well, if I'm a murderer and they're so smart, why didn't they find this?" Then he dropped a machete right on the table in front of them. It was intimidation, it was arrogance, and it was terrifying. So, on the surface, Donald was telling investigators, "Yeah, I'm really close with my family. We all get along great. We're tight." But when law enforcement actually reached out to some out-of-town relatives, the story started to look different. Turns out, Donald was kind of the black sheep of the family. While his brothers Richard and John and their mom Vonsell were doing really well financially, and Donald, not so much. He had a modest low-end job, living by himself in a small, slightly messy home. Nothing fancy. Donald worked as a security guard at Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola, living paycheck to paycheck. Basically, all he really owned was his car. And yet, the Smiths lived a simple, humble life. They weren't flashy, but the money was there. That kind of contrast, you could see how it might have brewed some resentment, maybe even jealousy. After the deaths of the Smith family, relatives came in to start cleaning out the home. And while they were going through a filing cabinet, they stumbled across a will that had never been officially filed. They took it to a local attorney, and when investigators later interviewed both the attorney and family members, a huge detail came to light. Donald Hartung had been written out of the will. Vonsell had left the entire estate, valued at over $1 million, to Richard and John. The only way Donald was ever going to get a piece of that pie was if not just his mother, but also both of his brothers were gone. So right away, Donald jumps to the top of the suspect list. But at that point, investigators still didn't have a smoking gun, a piece of hard forensic evidence tying him directly to the crime. It wasn't until October, months later, that DNA evidence started coming back from the lab, and that's when the case really took a turn. Now, here's the tricky part. When the suspect is family, it's expected that their DNA might show up somewhere in the house. The question is where it shows up. Donald's DNA was found in some very telling places. First, on the latch of Vonsell's purse, sitting right among cigarette butts. That's not just casual contact. Then, it was found on Richard's computer bag, a bag Richard carried everywhere, including to work that day. There's no reason Donald should have touched that bag, and yet it ended up on the kitchen counter, far from where Richard's body was found. And then there's Richard's belt. DNA from Donald was found on the inside of it. The way the belt was pulled, it looked like a natural grab point, like someone trying to drag a body might do. Why would Donald's DNA be there on both the back of his brother's belt, on his mother's purse, and on his brother's computer bag? Investigators knew exactly when Richard left work that day. They knew he was wearing the same clothes when he left as when he was found dead. That meant Donald was in the house at the time of the murders. In that moment, law enforcement had their man. A warrant was issued for Donald Hartung's arrest on 3 counts of first-degree premeditated murder, and on October 27, 2015, he was taken into custody. While he sat in jail waiting for trial, an unexpected lead came from inside the walls of the facility. A cellmate reached out to investigators with details that nobody outside Donald's inner circle could have known. On May 4, 2016, detectives interviewed inmate Marlon Purifoy. What he told them was the kind of stuff that breaks a case wide open, things Donald had apparently confided to him while they shared a cell. He described bits of information that weren't public knowledge and that made his account immediately compelling. Donald knew about his mother's will. He knew he'd been cut out. He was angry and he'd been planning the killings for some time. He also explained the grotesque logic behind the piles of clothes and blankets found on the victims. Donald, he said, had deliberately stacked those layers to keep the bodies warm to mask the true time of death. If the bodies stayed warm, investigators might think the murders happened later in the week, Not on that Tuesday, when Donald was known to be in the house. It's always a gamble relying on a jailhouse informant. You start to wonder about credibility, whether they're just spinning a story to get something for themselves. That's always the concern. But in this case, it was different. The info the cellmate gave lined up perfectly with what the investigators were seeing at the scene and with the other evidence. Everything fit, and the motive was clear: money. Donald thought he could eliminate the family, be the last one standing, and inherit it all. If he had gotten away with it, he would have walked away with over $2 million, the entirety of the estate. Plain and simple, it was greed and cold calculation.
Did there come a time when Mr. Hartung talked about the murder of his family?
Yeah, he told me.
Okay. And did he tell you who killed his mother and two brothers?
He said he killed him.
Did he tell you why?
He said he want the money because she left him out the will.
Now, did he tell you if the murders was it just something that kind of happened, or was it something he'd been thinking about?
Well, he said he'd been playing it last 3 to 4 years. He said Ouija board made him go overboard though.
The what? I'm sorry?
A Ouija board.
What about a Ouija board?
He said that really made him do it, made him go overboard. He went to his mother, then he tortured her so she can tell the combination for the safes and stuff.
He said he tortured her, I'm sorry?
He tortured her.
How?
He cut her left pinky finger so he can tell the combination for the safes and stuff.
Now, was it normal or abnormal to see RT come home while Hartung was still at the house?
It was not usual. Usually, Mr. Hartung was gone before RT came home.
In the end, the prosecution's strongest weapon wasn't a confession or a witness who saw it happen. It was DNA. Those traces became the silent witnesses that tied Donald to the murders. After nearly 5 years of building the case, after almost a month in the courtroom, and hearing from around 30 different witnesses, it all came down to the jury. Everything, the evidence, the testimonies, the painstaking investigation, rested in their hands. After roughly 4 hours of deliberation, the jury came back with a verdict.
Hi, member of the jury, it's my understanding you reached a verdict. Have you reached a verdict? Yes.
As to the charge in count 1, Bonsil Smith, we the jury find the defendant, Donald Hartung, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. As to the charge in count 2, John Smith, we the jury find the defendant, Donald Hartung, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment. As to the charge in count 3, Richard Smith, we the jury find the defendant, Donald Hartung, guilty of first-degree murder as charged in the indictment.
Donald showed no emotion, and the smile was gone. In Florida, for first-degree murders, there are really only 2 possible outcomes: life in prison or the death penalty. And for that death penalty to happen, the jury has to be unanimous. On the day of the sentencing, Donald Hartung suddenly jumped to his feet, demanding to speak. What followed would stun everyone in the room, but instead of pleading for his life, he turned on the very people who were supposed to save it in an unhinged, hour-long rant.
Mistress Wilson replied, after I asked her opinion, she said, "You're a stupid asshole." I said, "What? What did you say?" And Mistress Wilson said, "I said you're a stupid asshole." I'm a $10 hour security guard, Your Honor. I couldn't possibly be expected to go up against 4 seasoned attorneys. I was duped and I was tricked, and I'm willing to admit it. And so were you.
Ultimately, Donald was sentenced to 3 life sentences and would not face the death penalty. The lawyers he wanted fired had kept him off death row. For the defense, it was a stunning victory. Prosecutors could only speculate. Maybe Donald's frail, aging appearance swayed a few jurors. Maybe they figured he'd die in prison soon enough. Despite all the media attention and speculation, this case boiled down to one thing: greed. Donald thought he could take out his entire family and inherit it all. 3 family members who just took care of each other, who worked hard, lived honest lives, and all of that was taken from them in a brutally violent way. There are no real winners in cases like this, but there's a certain measure of justice in seeing the community and the remaining family members get some closure. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.